Brooke Lee Hanson was born on April 17, 1979. She lived with her family in Travelers Rest, a small town in the state of South Carolina in the United States. According to sources, the young woman dropped out of school in her first year of high school, but the real reasons for this were never clarified. Her family described her as a fun young woman who loved outdoor activities such as hiking. She also enjoyed shopping with her mother and camping near South Carolina mountains. On July 3, 1999, Brooke, then 20 years old, organized a party with several friends that lasted almost all night. That day, her parents had gone to a concert in Charlotte, a nearby town, and returned at approximately 2 a.m. on the July 4th. When they arrived home, they saw Brooke sitting on the front porch of her house and looking dejected. When asked by her parents about what had happened, Brooke said that she and her boyfriend, a guy named Ricky Shirley, had a falling out earlier that night. After explaining what happened to her parents, the young woman said she would go to a nearby store to buy cigarettes. In the meantime, she had another argument with her boyfriend, and he wanted to stay in the residence due to be angry at her. With that, she decided to write him a note in which she said, "Come after me if you still care," and left this note on top of the table in the house. Brooke left the residence at approximately 2:30 a.m. The store she went to was approximately 2 blocks from her residence. Despite being only 2 blocks away, the blocks in question are quite long, so the distance was about a mile to get to the store. After that, Brooke never returned home and was nowhere to be seen. Christy Metcalf, an aunt of Brooke, said in a later interview that she was with the girl's parents when they returned the early hours of July 4th. She confirmed that Brooke was sitting on the porch and that the young woman's boyfriend, Ricky Shirley, was inside the house. According to her, the last 2 people from the party were leaving by the time they arrived. Christy said she returned home and called Brooke's mother, Kathy, around 7 a.m., to which the woman replied that she couldn't speak to her at the time. So the next day she went back to the Hanson house around 3 p.m. When she got there, she said she knew right away that something was very wrong. It was then that she received the news of her niece's disappearance. Christy recommended that Kathy report it to the authorities, as 12 hours had passed since she left the house. The two then called the police department to report what had happened. Shortly thereafter, an officer named Hendricks from the Travelers Rest Police Department arrived at the residence and wrote an incident report based on Kathy's statements. The woman told about the conversation she had with her daughter, her argument with her boyfriend, and the young woman's decision to go buy cigarettes at a nearby store. About the boyfriend, Kathy said that he stayed in Brooke's room and that he was probably sleeping. After dawn, Kathy noticed that Brooke hadn't come home. She saw that Ricky was still sleeping in her daughter's room and found the note that the young woman wrote him. Kathy showed Ricky the note, and he said he hadn't seen it. Around 9 a.m., Ricky got a call from someone named Greg. After that, a white pickup truck pulled up to the house to pick him up. One thing that caught the attention of detectives was the fact that both Ricky, the young woman's boyfriend, and his friends didn't want to cooperate with investigations. Ricky had a criminal record for crimes such as robbery and selling illegal substances. Coupled with the fact that he was unwilling to cooperate with the authorities, he became the prime suspect in his girlfriend's disappearance. In addition to Ricky, several other people in Brooke's social circle were involved in criminal activities, which made the case even more complicated. All the people who were present at the party that Brooke had given at her parents' house were questioned, but didn't provide any relevant information. Detectives also worked with the hypothesis that perhaps the young woman ran away on her own or decided to just disappear for a while. However, her family members stated that it was extremely unusual for her to leave the house and stay away for days without notice. The family even complained about the investigations, saying that the authorities only started the search for the young woman after 3 weeks of her disappearance. In an attempt to find the young woman, the police reconstructed the entire route she had taken that morning, but even so, they were unable to find anything. When she disappeared, Brooke was wearing a beige top, green and brown shorts, black sandals, a silver bracelet, and a silver watch. Unlike other cases of disappearance, where several people gather in groups, Whether authorities or even family members volunteered to look for the missing person, in this case you hardly saw people looking for Brooke. It is not known for sure why this is, but mostly 3 people were seen searching for her. According to sources, none of her friends mobilized to carry out searches. As Brooke's boyfriend Rick Shirley was the prime suspect, all detectives' attention was focused on him. The young woman's relatives also suspected that the boy could have something to do with her disappearance. Realizing that the eyes of the authorities were on him, Ricky hired a lawyer and decided that he would remain silent on anything involving his girlfriend's disappearance. Obviously, this attitude made the young woman's family increase their suspicions about him even more. One of the detectives in charge of the case, a man named John Campbell, said that every time he tried to question Ricky, the young man would go silent and refuse to talk. Despite all of Ricky's strange and suspicious behavior, people who knew him said he was more concerned that the police would find out about his criminal activities than his alleged involvement in Brooke's disappearance. As time passed without the young woman being found, some questions began to arise, starting with the fact that her parents allowed her to go out alone at that time at night to buy cigarettes without anyone stopping her, or at least offering her a ride. This was probably because they understood that she wanted to go to be alone for a while, after having an argument with her boyfriend, but it still sounded quite irresponsible to some people. The hours were also questioned, in the sense that it seemed highly unlikely that a store would be open. This is both because it is late at night, a time that does not attract customers, and because in the state of North Carolina, it is not allowed to sell alcoholic beverages after 7 p.m., which causes the number of customers to drop dramatically. What we imagine is that the store could be working and selling alcoholic beverages kind of under the cloth, and that Brooke knew about it for living relatively close. Another possibility raised is that the young woman, in fact, could be going to meet with some kind of criminal contact that was related to the sale of narcotics or things like that, since this seemed to be something common in her circle of friends. For the detectives, if that were the case, somehow things could have gotten out of hand. As time went by, part of the people who followed the disappearance and the police themselves began to believe that Brooke was already dead. The police even went so far as to say that they were investigating another potential suspect, but that they couldn't disclose his identity as they were still not sure if he really had anything to do with the disappearance. Anyway, time went by and the police didn't get anything that could lead them to Brooke, or at least known what actually happened to her. In June 2006, nearly 7 years since the disappearance of Brooke Lee Hanson, a man from upstate New York called authorities reporting that Brooke had applied for a babysitting position he was offering. Still according to this man, he asked for the young woman's documents, and when he searched for her name on the internet, he saw that she had been missing since 1999. The South Carolina detectives on the case quickly flew to New York to meet with Brooke. Finally, the case that lasted almost 7 years was close to being closed, and by all indications, the young woman was fine. Upon arriving in New York, Brooke was already in the custody of the local police, and that's when the South Carolina detectives realized that something was very wrong. Brooke was actually not Brooke, but Esther Elizabeth Reed. That's right, another woman was impersonating the young woman, making use of all of her documents. But who was Esther Elizabeth Reed, and how did Brooke Lee Hanson's papers end up in her hands? Esther was born in 1978 and was originally from Townsend, Montana. In the early 90s, her parents separated and she moved with her mother to Mount Lake Terrace, Washington. In 1995, she dropped out of high school, and in 1999, the same year Brooke disappeared, she was charged with attempted fencing. Shortly after this accusation, at the age of 20, Esther simply disappeared from the map, not telling anyone, not even a family member, where she was going. In 2001, she assumed the identity of a young woman named Natalie Bauman and enrolled at California State University at Fullerton. Around the same time, Esther befriended several cadets at the United States Naval Academy and even dated one of these cadets for a long time. Meanwhile, the real Natalie Bauman, who was a medical student, was in Peru and had no idea that someone was using her identity. In 2003, Esther moved from California to New York. There, she assumed the identity of Brooke Lee Hanson, and after passing an exam, she entered Columbia University. At this university, Esther studied psychology and graduated in 2 years. Now let's pick up where we left off. With Esther in custody, South Carolina detectives questioned her about how she got Brooke's papers and what her connection was to her disappearance. Esther, even when cornered, didn't give in, even with several evidence pointing out that she was a fake who impersonated other people. The woman told detectives that she was Brooke Lee Hanson and that she decided to run away from home because her parents were so violent with her. She also said that she just wanted to live a normal life in peace, that she had never harmed anyone, and asked the detectives not to tell her parents where she was. The woman was so convincing that detectives considered the possibility that she really was the young woman who disappeared in 1999. They then contacted John Campbell, their superior at the Travelers Rest Police Department in South Carolina, and explained the whole situation. John, upon being updated on the case, told the man that he thought it was very unlikely that the woman was in fact Brooke. According to him, the Brooke he knew was a young party girl who wanted nothing to do with a circle of friends of a dubious nature. He thought that with that profile, the young woman would never have passed Columbia University, as the supposed Brooke who was in New York did. Anyway, to avoid any further doubts, the man told detectives that the best way to find out if the woman was really Brooke or not would be through a DNA test. John then told the man to collect the DNA of the alleged Brooke in New York, that he would collect the DNA of the missing young woman's relatives in South Carolina to do an analysis. When told that she would have to give a DNA sample, Esther didn't care and said that she would do. The woman was then released and went on to answer for her crimes in freedom. However, on the day she was supposed to appear at the local where the DNA sample was to be taken, she didn't show up, and detectives were unable to get in touch with her. Shortly thereafter, the officers got her address, which was an apartment, and went to the location with a warrant. There, they forced entry, and upon gaining access to the interior of the property, they saw that it was actually empty. There was almost nothing. Esther had taken most of her things and left. The officers searched the place in hopes of finding a hair so they could have the DNA they needed to make the comparison, but they found nothing. It was as if Esther had given the place a thorough cleaning to erase any trace of her. The only thing they found of importance was a video plaque signed in Boston, Massachusetts, with the name Natalie Bauman. And that's how the authorities got all the information I gave you here just now. Well, with Esther off the radar, there wasn't much the South Carolina detectives could do. They then informed John Campbell of the presumed Brooke escape and returned to Travelers Rest. After Elizabeth Reed was placed in the top 10 most wanted fugitives by the United States Secret Service. This is because, after collecting more information about her and the identity she assumed, there was a huge suspicion that she was a spy in the service of an enemy nation. Guys, the whole story around Esther is surprising and it seems like a movie script. I can't put it on here because otherwise, this video would take more than an hour and we would also lose the focus that is Brooke. But just to summarize the outcome here for you, she was arrested in 2008 in the state of Illinois. Fun fact, her arrest was by chance. The police weren't looking for her, but for a man who had taken the lives of 5 women in a store. The agents were checking vehicles with plates that were from outside the region, since the information they had was that the criminal was from outside. It was then that they found a vehicle with plates from another state parked in a motel. When verifying who was the owner, they located Esther in one of the rooms of the place and discovered that she was being wanted by the Secret Service. The woman could face up to 47 years in prison for all the crimes she was responsible for. But after an agreement here, another there, she was sentenced to only 4 years, being released in October 2011. Returning to Brooke's case, the young woman's family was overjoyed when they learned that she was supposedly alive and living in New York. But once John Campbell informed them that the supposed Brooke had run away and that he thought it was very unlikely that she was actually Brooke, they were devastated. Years had passed, and this was the only clue closer to the real thing they had in that time. Time went by again. New detectives took over Brooke's case, but even so the authorities didn't obtain new advances. In 2008, when Esther was finally arrested, Travelers Rest detectives were able to question her to see if she had anything to do with Brooke's disappearance or at least had some information about it. Esther told detectives that she never knew Brooke and that she had nothing to do with her disappearance. She also said that she only found out about her disappearance, and after research she discovered information that helped her create false documents with the young woman's name. The woman claimed that she had never wanted to harm anyone and that she only did what she did to overcome her painful past. To the detectives, it looked like Esther really had nothing to do with Brooke's disappearance and that she was just an opportunistic scammer. With that, the case again returned to square one, and the investigations were stopped. Brooke's case generated a backlash from the police. This is because, according to some people, the police officers involved in the case didn't investigate it vigorously. In addition, the case was also marked by some controversies. According to Brooke's parents, the cops broke into their house without a warrant while they were gone and rummaged through the inside. After that, the young woman's parents would have threatened to file a compensation lawsuit against the Travelers Rest Police Department if the officers involved in the action were not punished. As a result, a few months later, the officers involved resigned from their posts. There was also the case of a videotape that was sent to detectives at the time of the disappearance. According to sources, this videotape belonged to the closed security circuit of a hotel in the city. It contained footage dated July 4, 1999, that showed a young woman very similar to Brooke entering the hotel but never leaving. At the time, the person in charge of the investigation said that he checked the footage several times, but nothing relevant that could help the case was found. For some people, this tape was crucial evidence, and they believed that the police acted with disdain towards it. Another thing that also brought some controversy to the case was the fact that a psychic claimed during an interview that she had a vision of Brooke's body and that the person responsible for what happened to the young woman had something unusual in their left hand. People who followed the case even said that this criminal was Ricky Shirley, Brooke's boyfriend. I couldn't find correct information as to why people believed it was him, but it appears to be because the guy had what appeared to be a tattoo or scar on his left hand. Later, upon learning of Ricky's long criminal record, the psychic stopped giving interviews and providing information about her visions with Brooke, she said, out of fear. A week after she stopped talking about the case, the office of the newspaper where she gave the interviews suffered an attempted arson. 2 weeks later, Ricky Shirley's car was stolen and driven off a bridge. Both the attempted arson and the theft of the vehicle were not resolved. In the year 2012, still looking for evidence, the chief of police of the Department of Travelers Rest said he firmly believes that there were people who were close to Brooke who knew exactly what happened to her, but who for some reason don't want to talk. He also said he was pretty sure who was responsible for the crime, but since he didn't have a body, witnesses or any evidence, he couldn't file a formal charge against that person. On February 24, 2015, police found human remains abandoned in an undisclosed location. For a moment, they believed those remains could be Brooke's. However, it couldn't be identified due to the long decomposition time, and the hypothesis ended up losing strain. Still in 2015, the police revealed that they got some tips on a possible location of Brooke's whereabouts. They said they investigated these tips thoroughly, but none of them confirmed to be true, and investigations were closed again. In September 2019, Ricky Shirley, Brooke's ex-boyfriend, was found dead in his mother's home at the age of 42. At the time, detectives stated that his death was under investigation and the results of forensic examinations could take months, but there was no evidence of a crime at the scene. The reports of these analyses, as far as I have researched, have never been released to the public. In a statement, the chief of police said that Ricky was always a person of great interest in investigations, but that he never wanted to cooperate with the authorities. He also said that he had hopes that one day the boy would say what he really knew about Brooke's disappearance, but now with his death it would be impossible. The chief of police ended up by saying that he was not there to judge anyone, but that he would go after the truth until he found it. As time went by, new theories for Brooke's disappearance emerged. Some people claimed that she would have been seen alive in a community called River Falls, but this was never actually confirmed. The hypothesis also arose that she could have moved in with Ricky and kept herself a secret by living with him, while he went about his life normally so as not to arouse suspicion. The fact is that Brooke's case left many questions. The fight with her boyfriend that night, the conversation with her parents, the fact that she went out alone to buy cigarettes, the liquor store that shouldn't even be open. All of this raises a series of questions that had never been properly answered. This was the story of Brooke Lee Hanson's disappearance case, a case that has remained unsolved for over 20 years, with a series of unanswered questions and the family's distress of not knowing what really happened. Alright folks, thanks for watching until the end. Best wishes, and I see you next time.